Great. Hi, Lee. Hi, Megan. Carol. Hey, somebody joining from Seattle. That's great. We're based in Seattle, FYI. Hi, Joanna. Good to see you. Joining from England, no less. Sandy. Good to see you again. Leslie, Carolee. Well, I think we've got a lot of folks joining, and I don't want to waste your time. I know you're anxious to hear from our CTO, Eric Oemig. My name is Tu Duong. Thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar, where we're going to show you how to use our new studio tools to make your boom cards more accessible. A couple of housekeeping details before we start. We are recording this webinar. We will share the recording link with you tomorrow in an email. So not to worry if you miss anything, you'll be able to watch it in full. As you've already found the chat box. Great to hear from you there. If you do have any questions, though, we ask that you put them in the Q&A box. All of you will be able to see the questions and the answers. That just really helps us keep track of all the questions. And I know you have a lot. So please put them there. After the presentation, we are going to have a live Q&A. So Eric's going to be here to answer all your questions. We also have a couple other folks joining us. We have John Sandel, our VP of Growth, Kyle Savchek, our Customer Success Extraordinaire, and Ashley Beach, our Customer Service and Tech Support Expert. So thank you all for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to our co-founder and CTO, Eric Oemig.
Great, thank you, Tu. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eric. I'm looking through some of the folks here. I know a few of you. A lot of you are new to me. I've been doing this for a few years. I'm one of the co-founders, and Mary and I started the company because we thought we could do something special for kids. One of the things, though, I'll say early on is this has been a partnership with our content creators. A great story, and I'm getting long in the tooth. I repeat myself. So for those of you that are just meeting me for this first time, you're going to enjoy like, oh, Eric's full of great stories. Those who've been around probably heard this before, but real early on, Rachel Annette, who I think is actually on this call, was designing some boom cards, and I'm like, she put dancing cupcakes on, on this thing, like that has zero learning content. What do I know about teaching? And I was like, see, that's how I'm learning from you guys. So we built this platform, and you guys continue to amaze me. One of the features we had was someone said, it'd be really neat if we could do drag and drop. And I was like, drag and drop, like that, like dragging an item from here to there, isn't that just the same thing as like tapping and selecting an answer? Fine, we'll add drag and drop if that's what you guys want. I'm just blown away, and all the things you guys have built. So today is just in that same vein. There's a lot of things that we have to get through, so I'll just jump into it. I'm going to try and share my screen. Let's see if I got this right. Tu, help me out. Is everything looking good?
Looks great.
All right. So the purpose of this meeting is we're going to talk about accessibility and the who, what, when, why, where, what does that mean? And we're going to spend a little bit of time just kind of getting grounded. We're a small company, we're all friends here. And then I think the teaching community is also like we're just really supportive, and we're trying to help kids succeed and reach their best potential. So why accessibility and why now? Well, accessibility is just the right thing to do, and universal design principles have a great spillover. And a lot of times people say, hey, can I have this feature? That'd be great for me. And I'm thinking, well, if we think about that feature just a little bit more, that's gonna be great for like everybody. Curb cuts are great, ramps are great for everybody. Better print universal design is just a good thing. But we're also seeing changes from legislatures where they're not saying it's just a good idea, but it's the law. And we're having conversations with, at state levels where people are telling us if you don't come into compliance, uh, boom cards will not be uh, something that anyone in our state can use for any level of classrooms or kids. So it's just something that we as educators have to adapt to. There's legal requirements for it, and it's the right thing to do. I want to talk just a little bit of some vocabulary. Um, we're using the term accessibility a lot. Internally, I find that's really hard to type. So I type A11Y or ARIA or ADA just because it's a lot easier. But what all these things mean is there's a web standard called Accessible Rich Internet Apps. It's a way to queue to the browser, to screen readers, to allow people with different abilities to have access to the World Wide Web. So you'll hear these terms switched around. Um, they mean a lot of the same things. Alt text is so named because very early on, images were given something called an alt. And so that's an HTML inside baseball uh, terminology. And then we just kind of use that to describe providing text representations for things that aren't inherently text. So we also internally refer to captions, closed captions for video or sound as alt text or accessibility text. Anyway, so that's just some vocabulary, so we're all sitting on the same page. The things that we're really thinking about at Boom is 3 levels of accessibility. The vision elements, sound and hearing considerations, and finally motor control. So if you think about someone and this there's a fun little story, like a lot of people get confused. I think we still have to remind ourselves and ground ourselves on this. If you think about an image, a blind person can't see an image, so they need text to be narrated to them so they can hear the image. Someone who can't hear or has to work in an environment with mute speakers, they can see images, they can read text, but they can't hear the sounds. So we're turning sound into visual elements, namely words. And then someone who's got poor motor control with their hands may have to use their eyes or their feet to control the keyboard and the mouse. So we're thinking about 3 areas. And we're also thinking about this at the level of when you design a deck, it may pass, if there's no sound elements in it, well, then it's accessible to people who are hearing impaired. And if there's no drag and drop on it and you're not interacting with small little elements on it, well, then it's also accessible to folks with motor control issues. So right away, your mind should start thinking about, okay, so what does accessibility really mean and how do I meet the requirements of accessibility? And we'd like as many decks as possible to meet accessibility requirements across all 3 pillars, but in many cases that's really not reasonable. So you should be thinking about accessibility from these 3 areas, and these are different badges that your deck is going to earn and be labeled in the store. People who are searching for content in the store might say, I need to find things that have that are accessible to reduce motor control, and they put a filter on, and fewer decks would show up, and decks that they really care about then would be visible. When we're talking about accessibility, some people think, oh, alt text is like this brand new thing. And wow, why are we talking about accessibility? We've really talked about accessibility in the past a lot. I've coached quite a few folks over the years about Z order. And this isn't just an accessibility, it's a just plain usability thing. Some of my favorite early examples were decks that were like fill in the blank plus fill in the blank equals fill in the blank. And there were other, different cues. And when you tabbed between the two things, you went to the equal sign, then to the plus sign, then to a different plus, and it just didn't make any sense. And so, whenever I saw something like that, I would just hit the feedback button to the author and just be like, your tab order is off a little bit. By the way, this is Eric from Boom. And so some of you may be familiar with getting feedback from me like that. If I happen to see it in the store, I just hit the feedback button and say hello and give my comments that way. So we're talking today about color contrast, Z orders, and alt text. Now, who has to do this and when? Well, anyone who wants to list in the Boom marketplace has to do this. If you're just making personal items for your own personal use, we don't care. Yeah, do whatever works best in your classroom. But if you want to share these with other educators, you're going to be required to meet some of these levels of accessibility requirements. And then a special note, I think there's been some confusion, so I just want to really take the time to clarify. If you don't like these accessibility things, they're slowing you down. We're not planning on removing your existing content or delisting it from the general marketplace at all. Like that's not on the table. We're not planning on kicking people out of the Premier program for failure to comply. What we are talking about doing is removing items from the Boom Passport inventory in sometime in that July of next year timeframe if they don't meet certain levels of accessibility on those three pillars that we talked about. So, so what does that mean? Well, if you happen to be a Premier publisher, by the way, just a reminder for everyone, Passport kicks off this summer. Some of you may have been paid a few pennies here and there. That's just some test money we've thrown in. Some people got a few bucks. Since about February, we've been running an internal beta. And so that, we play around, we put some decks into the store, we experiment with it, and it earns, like I said, a few pennies. And when it settles out, you're getting a normal payment plus an additional payment. Passport's going to launch, so somewhere starting around, say, August and September, those Premier publishers will start to see actual revenue now coming from those specific school districts that our new sales team that John's been running has been crafting these new deals. Anyway, so that Passport inventory that's available to those school districts, we would start to pull things out of that inventory. So when you're thinking about which content you want to make accessible, you would want to hit your best-selling content first and your things that are making the most revenue through the Passport program. So how do you want to get started? Again, start with your most popular decks or your most important ones. It's really easy to, I think at this point, to start adding accessibility text as you're authoring new content. I know there's a few of you who are sitting there going, like, you haven't seen my content. This isn't easy. This is driving me crazy. I'm going to talk about that a little bit at the end, but I really want to, like, I know this is heavy on quite a few people's minds. And I got a great demo from David Sindri yesterday. That guy's next level. I love looking at his stuff. I love his feedback. And, you know, we'll talk about joining our feedback program and how we get native users. But so we know we're not perfect yet, and you've got some really great ideas about how we can make it a little bit easier. And so, like I said, in a few slides, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So get started. You can do this piecemeal. You can start modifying some of your older things. You can start doing some uh, partial steps on some of your existing content. I actually think the most important things you should get right is the Z ordering. So for some of you, this might be the first time you're thinking, oh, well, what's that about? And then I just want to remind folks, don't play games. 99% of you guys are awesome. There's always some clown that gets in the room and has to try and abuse a thing. And then my team has to go build extra auditing tools and give Brittany tools. And I just don't have the patience for it. We'll audit you like we always do. We'll help you, we'll warn you, and if you're naughty, we'll kick you out. And that's just how it works. So don't overpromise on accessibility. Just try to do the right thing. And if you need help, if I always say this to my kids, if my kids think I'm asking them to do something unreasonable, either they don't understand the ask or I didn't. So we just gotta, negotiate on that and find the right bridge. So when does this
But
all?
we are here to help. I just want to let everybody know that Eric, the reason for this webinar is to help you out, to help you make your boom cards accessible for all students, to empower those students with tools to reach their educational goals. I'm always here. You can email me at 2@boomlearning.com. We have Ashley and Kyle who can help out in tech to support if you email help@boomlearning.com. We're here to support you. So we
Thank
want
you.
to partner with you
Yeah,
to
thank you. Thank you
make
too. That's
your resources accessible for all.
that's really good for two to do. Apparently, I was too strong with my motherly tone there. Yeah, like I said from the beginning, we try to be all collaborative, and I know 99.9% of you folks are here because you want to do the right thing. And anyway, so when do we have to? So when is the right thing due? We're gonna put out some little warners, a little dialogue that's going to pop up pretty soon. We're going to start requiring alt text very soon. You won't be able to publish new content without the alt text. I'm still a little bit, it says on this slide, it's going to start in July where you have to have alt text on all your new stuff. I'm actually a little bit soft on that. I think internally we're still just trying to hear from you guys to see if that's a bridge too far for July. Um, so like we'll keep playing that one by ear a little bit, and that just gets back to like you let us know how these things are really touching you and affecting you, and make a case, right? Just pitch us. Retroactive content gets started now, but you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it now. And this always reminds me of what is it expression? Early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. Um, there's something really great about jumping right out there and getting in on this, but we're going to be a little bit slow about rolling out filters because and boosts to search because we want to give you guys the time. So I'm not trying to rush anyone here. Um, you guys have time to figure out what you need to get done and wrap your head around what content you want to migrate and how you want to do that. So it's not just a big rush to try and do this thing all at once. And then, the other important deadline is July of next year. And I should also point out a lot of the districts that we're working with have been wonderful too. They've been auditing us and saying, "Hey, you've done a fine job in some areas of the app, but in particular, your content's not accessible." And we're like, "Yes, we've always said our app is accessible. The content is buyer beware." And they're pushing back and they're saying, "Well, that's not acceptable. Um, Fix it." And we're like, "Well." Okay, but it's user generated content. And they say, yeah, you've got time. We'll work with you as well. Give us some estimates and show, demonstrate progress, and we'll give you contingent approvals. And we check in later. So that's just all part of this whole collaborative ecosystem. So now let's just kind of jump into what we were talking about. Here's an example. I think it's pretty obvious. We don't have any color contrast tools or auditing built in the app yet. I don't really know when we'll add this. It's not on our near-term roadmap, but there's some really great tools that are available online, as well as there's some kind of good common sense guidelines, like white on almost white is a really bad idea. Small fonts are bad. Putting things too close together, not great. So bigger, bolder, and high contrast is great. Moving on, I've talked about Z-order a little bit, and I think this is one of the most important things, which is why I've got, like, I don't know, 12 slides dedicated to it, and I've already mentioned a bunch of times. So Z-order is so easy to kind of screw up. And one of the things that we added quite a few years ago to help people really get to the Z-order understanding was this selectable items list on the far right of the screen, because it lets you see, at a glance how things are looking. And we've got some really great improvements that have just launched over the last couple of weeks. In fact, yesterday or the day before, we launched another really great improvement. I think it might have been yesterday. Anyway, so lots of great things, and we're gonna keep improving that selectable item list to really help queue on Z-order things. But I've got a little demo here. If I can play this video, let's see, how do I do this? Hopefully you can hear this, but what you're going to hear and see is the screen reader is jumping all over. So someone who's blind would really have no idea what's going on.
Information button, bottom, but first in Z order. Top of screen, but narrated second.
Now that goes pretty fast. What she was, and I don't know if you could hear what she was saying, but she was reading out what was happening on the screen, and it wasn't from top to bottom. It was just kind of jumping.
Information button.
And then here's like a really great example where you can imagine someone authoring this deck and going, okay, I'm going to ask 2 questions. So they type the 2 questions, and let's see if this little highlighter thing works. So I type my 2 questions, and then I'm going to have my fill in the blanks. So I enter both of those and I fill those in. And so then those show up in the Z-order over here. And then when I run it, and you're tabbing, well, hopefully at least the 2 fill in the blanks are tabbing in the right order. But for a blind person, this could be like, who's the first president? Well, in this one, it's like, who's the current president? Who's the first president? And then blank. And they'd just be absolutely flummoxed as to how to fill that in. So if we look at a really good example, we have the first question, then we have the first fill in the blank, etc. We've made another recent improvement to how we're doing accessibility text. We're now putting the image that you're labeling right there in the dialogue. And it turns out this is real important if you've got a lot of images, to be able to quickly see which image you're trying to label. And a recent change to the selectable item list. Now we're showing alt text in the selectable list so you can see what's there. We show the file name, but a lot of times the file name's not that useful, like the clipboard.jpegs. That's the name it gets when you paste from the clipboard. So super not useful, but the alt text is great. And then now when you tap the item in the alt text, you'll get directly to the dialogue with the picture of the image. So you don't have to be left guessing like which image is which one and what's happening. It's just tap and go. And we put the red highlighting there. So when you're just looking at a card at a glance, you can see what's missing. You can tap on the red thing and you can add that missing bit and also look at that, like I said, the Z order and see how everything's lining up. I mentioned we're going to start posting a warning. This is what it's going to look like when it first goes up. Not particularly scary, just an FYI that you're missing something. With alt text, go ahead and publish anyway, or don't publish, go fix it and then publish. And we'll run that until, I don't know, for a while. And like I said, we don't want to cause problems in, I'm open to some convincing on that. All right, let's talk about what alt text means. I wanted to spend just a little bit of time here because this is, I think, what a lot of folks are showing up to, is saying, I don't think I understand alt text. What if I'm just giving away the answers? So in the first case, here's an example where I could label these two images as a penny and a dime, and that's some really great, naive alt text that makes a lot of sense. But it also betrays the answer if I'm saying which one's the penny. So a blind person could play this thing, and if you labeled your alt text a little more cleverly and said, well, this is a copper-colored coin with Abraham Lincoln on it, this is a silver-colored coin, then you've provided alt text and you've done something interesting that didn't betray the answers. And I think this is going to be widely useful. What's also interesting, I was looking at some other decks, and I noticed sometimes the images are ambiguous enough, like someone's laughing. Is that a face? Is it a girl? Is it a smile? Is it laughing? Is it fun? And somebody's putting visible text right next to the image just to make clear what it is. And so alt text helps in more context than just with blind people. Yeah, I want to maybe make another comment on this one. It also goes back to here. We've got the comment that says, use none if you want the screen reader to ignore it. And I think there's still some confusion about what that means too. So remember I told you about Rachel's dancing cupcakes? That has no learning value. That's a decoration. So that should have a none. You don't put cupcake and then have the screen reader reading, there's a cupcake on the screen for the, for the vision impaired people. You put a none because it has no intrinsic value to the teaching content that's on that screen. It's decorative. Now, the web standard is that background images are also not narrated. We have some background images in the Boom platform, and we're currently not supporting labeling them because we had been considering those as decorative. Circling back to the demo I got from David Sindri, I see that we completely dropped the ball on that. So we will quickly have a solution for you. His example was a sound where it's not just the default sound icon, but he's changing the background image to, let's say, an alien. And then when you tap the sound, the alien talks to you. So we really need two alt texts for every sound. So we're going to split alt text for sound into the visual description and the audio description. And remember, we talked about alt text is confusing because sometimes we're turning a visual thing into an audio thing by giving it text. And sometimes we're turning an audio thing into a visual thing by turning a sound into text that you can see. And so a sound icon oftentimes is both. It's got a visual element and it's got an audio element. So we're going to make a requirement that you put the audio alt text there. The visual alt text would be optional, because it might, like, if you don't label it, if it's missing, we'll just call it a sound button. And so that's the description of it. And so for right now, if you're like, so what am I supposed to do right now? The alt text you're putting in is the caption. It's what you hear when you tap it. And then in the very near future, when we add that extra ability, this is about that second mouse coming along. If you've already labeled all your sounds, you're like, what? Now I got to go relabel the sounds. So that's that second mouse. Let's see. Let's jump back in here. Chained images. This has been I got great news for you guys. You've been asking for quite a while. How do I reorder chained images? That's coming real soon because we were in here fiddling around with chained images, and we said, yeah, let's give them that too while we're at it. But now all the chained images can have accessibility text as well. So that as you're flipping through each one, it gets its own text. It just makes sense. You knew it had to be coming. There it is. That launched, I think, this week as well. The drag and drop next week or the following for reordering those guys. I don't like to assume that everyone realizes that we've added this feature fairly recently. So the sound icon was always up in the top right corner. You just tapped it and it toggled between, and this was by by user request. The sound icon was like, can I turn off the whoops sounds? And so we added that, and then they're like, okay, I want all the sounds off sometimes for my classroom. So then what? And so it was just really a 3-state toggle button that you tap. Now we've got this thing pops up and you get to select between the 3 states of all the sounds are on, all the sounds are off, or just the interesting sounds so the wing, I don't know if feedback sounds is right. We should probably say ting and whoops are off, just to make that really clear. With a new slider, do we want us to visually show you the captions for sound? So you could have the sounds on, plus see them displayed, or you could have, and I think my next slide is a demo of just that. So I'm going to try and, yeah, maybe I'm not. I can't seem to. Okay, let's see if this works. So I'm showing that we can turn on the closed captioning for sounds. And then that one sounds like a keyboard click. So I've labeled it with alt text that it's a keyboard click. And these alerts will age off the screen at a reasonable time. The student can always tap it to dismiss it immediately, and they'll stack up. So if they're tapping around too quickly, then they'll get multiples of these. Let's talk again about what none means on alt text, because for sounds, you can imagine some sounds are decorative. Maybe it's jingling in the background. And you think, yeah, I don't really need the jingling in the background to have it. So just put none there. If it's just thematic background music as the alt text. If it's dialogue, put some words. We definitely have the text length too short for sounds. It turns out that was a database limitation when we first built this for images. So coming soon, you'll get a much longer text length for labeling your sounds. You should not put none if you said, well, here's a great deck I was just looking at the other day. Really nicely done, I thought. I think it was even a featured deck. The author put some words at the top, and as you tabbed onto each card, the sound had an autoplay and it just narrated the same text that was at the top. So that's already accessible, right? There's a sound that's talking to you, reading the words of the text that's right there. So do you need alt text on that? Well, yes and no. You could put a none there, though I would discourage that, because what may happen is a user sees the sound and tries to interact with it and taps it and it says, there's no alt text for this sound. And I'm like, well, I'm missing out on something. What is it doing? And whereas if you just repeat the same words to that sound, that you have already on the screen, you just translate, the words that are spoken, then the student doesn't feel like they're missing out anything when they tap the sound. It would display those same words again. So a bit maybe redundant, but I think still useful for completing that experience for the kid. All right, let's see. We're just about to the end. Quick time check. I think I'm probably been going long, but you guys had a lot of questions coming in, and I hopefully I've answered a lot of them. There's just a couple more I want to talk about in terms of this upcoming. So some of you have decks where you've taken screenshots of like a Google slide or a PowerPoint or a worksheet. You've got that picture and you've got it uploaded and you've layered things on top of it. And you're like, how do I label that background image? And we've thought about that and we said, well, we could let you label the background image, but we actually think there's a better option is to give optional alt text right at the card level so that when the card tabs on, you can narrate something specifically to the visually impaired about the card to help ground them. And that would be a way that you could read some of the content that's there. I already told you we're going to have longer alt text for sounds. I think something we've also kind of discovered is if we're really trying to put ourselves in the shoes of that student, the fill in the blank should just restate the question. We'll make that optional. You don't have to put it there. You have a question, who's the current president? The student is in a fill in the blank thing and it says, enter an answer. How about if it says, who's the current president, and just restates the question. So we think we can do, we think we can do better there by giving you those extra tools to help with that. We're also, this sounds really crazy, but we want to put alt text on text elements. Again, this would be 100% optional, and it gets right back to that example I talked about. So imagine you have a complicated image, and the way I've done, these kinds of decks where I'm taking a PowerPoint or a picture of a worksheet, and it's so easy. You just take that picture, you drop it in, you create a bunch of cards with background images. And then for me, I always put empty text elements on top of them and mark some as right answers and some as wrong answers, because I've got interactive, self-grading, super simple. Only what's the blind person gonna do? They like, I don't know. So if we allow optional alt text on a text element, which happens to be blank, then the screen reader would know to indicate, as I'm tabbing around, oh, the thing that's behind this is, a ghost, and the thing that's behind this is a football. And, not great for if the question was identify the football. Well, that's not what we do. We'd have to describe that as a brown ovaloid kind of a sport thing. instead of saying football. But that's the idea there is as you're tabbing between each of those buttons are actually floating interactive representations of the image that's behind it. So so we're anticipating putting that optional alt text on text elements. I already mentioned about we're going to do something different for sounds. We'll allow for 2 alt text elements on sounds. Some really big news is, and this is what happens when we get confronted with students who are using the app and really giving us that kind of good feedback. Drag drop today, the way we've done it, just doesn't work for those kids, and we can solve that. We can totally do that. So that's coming soon too. So drag drop will no longer be a deal killer for folks with limited mobility. Another question that's come up a bunch is, God, I have a lot of images. Can I just like mark it in my image library and then you can like every time I insert it? And so my answer is, yeah, kind of. And we're definitely leaning that direction. There's some risk involved in doing that because if you label the thing a football, that might not be the best tagging. But I think for the convenience that it earns, it's still a direction we want to go. But I also want to talk about, being pragmatic or just understanding what we're confronted with. Some folks are really good about they upload an image once, they organize it, and whenever they use that image, they use that image. Quite a few authors who just keep pasting or uploading the same image dozens and dozens of times. And so those guys wouldn't get any benefit really out of that because, they're not they're not going to go find the 87 footballs that they've uploaded and tag them all as footballs. So just to set expectations, I don't anticipate in the near term that we're going to scan through all your images, match them up against your already made cards, sniff the alt text and stick it into your item. That would require that you've tagged your images, which currently our library tool doesn't support that. So the first thing that would happen is we'll add that tagging, that ability to tag in your library and in the store. And then for those assets at the time that you insert them, we would presumably insert that alt text for you. And then you'd eyeball it and go, yep, that's just what I wanted. And you wouldn't have to change it. Or you go, oh, wait, no, I didn't mean to say penny. I meant to say copper colored coin with Abe Lincoln on it. All right, I think that's covered. Let's see. Yeah, wait, no. Last thing I wanted to say was if you are working with kids, we'd love to have you, maybe volunteer to give us candid feedback about how it's touching your students and what that impact's like. I'm going to stop here and just let me know what you guys are thinking about.
Thanks, Eric. There are a lot of questions in the Q&A, and I will try. Some of them are asking the same thing, so I will try and sift through them to get to as many as possible. Sandy asked, when we make changes to our decks, for example, to make suggested edits for accessibility, are we penalized in visibility? I know this is a concern when we have edited decks in the past.
Okay, Sandy. So the answer is no. The opposite. If you get your deck marked as fully accessible, you should earn a slight nudge. And like I said, we're waiting on that. I don't want to start doing positive nudges on content until we've given people enough time to kind of adapt and get used to it. But what you're really doing is you're alluding to a different search issue about, hey, I have changed something and now I feel like I'm getting like lower search results. And I am aware that that's happened in a couple of cases. We think we've fixed most of those. Um, if you think you're winning in search and you're like, I'm not quite ready because I don't want to risk it, I'll say make your best informed choice. However, maybe just to allay some of those concerns, what we have done and the way some people did find penalties is we built up our index by walking through, and some rules have been grandfathered, like um, descriptions, titles, and keywords. And when you unpublish them and republish them, some of those grandfather rules uh, were like, you're not grandfathered anymore. So we're applying, the most current algorithmic thinking about how to do this. And so some of the things that we didn't like that we were seeing was people naming all of their decks Christmas because they're like, oh, hey, that's kind of like a little backdoor trick to get a boost. And we're falling off a topic, but I know this hits you guys a lot, so I'm going to take an extra 90 seconds and cover it. So we said, yeah. So what did we have to do? We built some tools so you can't name every single one of your decks Christmas. So then people came up with a Christmas 1 and Christmas 2, and we're like, yeah, okay. So we also started punishing um, titles that we inferred were people that were trying to be abusive. So a title that's too short or too similar to something that they've done before. Um, and this is just all, some of this is really inside baseball. I'm not interested in rewarding people and getting them to win search because they're clever with, you know, trying to game the search algorithm. I want them to make really the best content and that we're going to boost it on, the quality of the deck. We're still working on how we can get, the best reviews and the most popular items to get more boosting. And speaking of alt text and search, we're also looking at using large language models in combination with the alt text that you're putting to help us in our search ranking. So I think that, just think of it like, hey, another way you can get keyword matching is the alt text on some of your images. Okay, that's my answer. That was a way too long of an answer, but no. Uh, Go fix your decks, republish them, and you might get a benefit in search. You might get a no impact on search for doing so. But certainly, we're never trying to punish things that get republished.
Thanks, Eric. Um, Also, is there an easy way for publishers and creators to, especially publishers, to know where they need to add accessibility text or which decks they need to add accessibility text to with respect to
So,
the warning box?
so, so I'll say this. Accessibility, again, I just want to remind you, like we don't really have a good way to audit tab order because you guys are designing your deck in ways where I can't just say the linear tab order should be the right thing. I haven't written a visual interpreter because again, sometimes you guys are like deliberately doing things in your flashlight games to make things hidden, to put items behind items. Believe me, I've looked. You guys are way too clever by half for me to figure out how to do all that. So I'm really counting on you guys to do the right thing. Now, if the question is like, so what should I do? Um, we're 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 already scanning, what you're publishing, and we're going to show up that warning box straight away, like by next week or something, right? And it's just going to say, hey, you're missing alt text. But that's the only thing we're going to look at. We're not going to be looking at your Z order. We're not going to be looking at your contrast. We're not going to be looking at the size or how many elements you necessarily have on the screen. So you guys have to do the right thing, right? And we hope that the marketplace rewards you for making really great content that's wonderful. And I think several of you have written in and made a pretty compelling case that, hey, some of these decks are really meant to be used in a therapy session, one-on-one with a certain kind of a student. And maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to consider all the accessibility elements. And I agree. You're making a good case. But I'm not sure if I really fully understand the question, but so if you have a deck and it has images, put the alt text on it. Just do it. If you've got sounds, put the alt text on it. Just do it. And starting in a few days, you're going to start getting warned if you didn't. I think I'm actually tempted to put a button that just says audit my deck. So you don't actually have to hit the publish button first. You just hit the button and it will scan it. But you can also scan through your cards and look at that selected items list on the right. You'll see stuff that's red, and that's a pretty good clue to go fill that one in. Last thing I'll just say is when you publish today, or not today, tomorrow, when that warning box comes up. By the way, I want to tell you something too. I should just acknowledge too. So as your advocate, I said, all right, we're going to put out that warning box on alt text. And two's like, really? Should we do that? Maybe we can wait a little bit. Maybe we have a webinar first. And I'm like, all right, I'm convinced. So we waited because so in my mind, we wrote this a long time ago, but you guys haven't seen it yet. So when you hit the publish button, doesn't matter which card you're on when you do it, we're going to sniff all the cards and we're going to highlight the first card that is missing something important and say, hey, guess what? You're missing something here. And then you can say, yeah, don't care, publish anyway, or you can go in and fix it and then hit the publish button again. And if you have another card a little bit further, we're going to pull that one up and say, you're missing something here. Did you want to fix it? And you can say, yep, I'll fix it, or nope, publishing it anyway. So that's what you'll have available. And I do think it would probably serve us to just put an audit button in right there so you don't have to go details, publish, whatever.
Okay. I just wanted to remind everybody that, if you're only the students or the folks who will be using screen readers will actually hear the alt text. So if your boom card is not meant, or if you're using it for speech therapy, for instance, and it's not necessarily meant for visually impaired students, your students who are not visually impaired will not hear that alt text. This is what in situations where students with visual impairments or hearing impairments using specific devices or apps designed to aid them will have the benefit of that auditory or visual aid when needed. So I think when Rika asked, why do we have to add alt text to decks where doing so would give away the answer? For example, listening to audio and then tapping on a photo that represents the vocabulary word. She works with adult ESL students. In that scenario, Rika, your students will be just fine because they are not necessarily using.
I just want to jump in on that, right? I've said it 2 or 3 different ways. I'm going to say it once again, so it's just really clear. If you cannot think of an alt text that doesn't betray the answer, then type none. Don't leave it blank, type none. And that's what you do because you're like, there's nothing I can do here that isn't giving away the answer. Um, so then you say none. So none means two things. None means this is not interesting as learning content, or it's redacted. It serves both roles. And I puzzled on this for a while, and I said, well, should I just put a checkbox in there saying, ignore alt text or redact alt text? And I was like, then I got to explain all that. And we just came up with, nope, none's simplest. If you really mean you don't want alt text, you don't want to name the thing because you know better, then the word you use is none. And that's it. It's that simple. And then you go like, God, that's a pain. It means I still got to go in and add. Yes, you do, because that's a way that you've affirmatively communicated to me that by me meaning our engine, the platform, that you've considered it, and you did what could be done.
Thanks, Eric. Kelly asked, will the character limit for accessibility text for transcribing speaking audio clips be increased to more than 150 characters? Many audio instructions that play through a created sound icon are impossible to limit to 150 characters.
Yeah. Yes. I mentioned on an earlier slide, thank you for asking the question, allows me to repeat that we are going to lengthen alt text limits. Images in particular should be brief. That's going to be a different limit than for sounds. Sounds necessarily need to have longer descriptions. And then if you can't fit the exact word for word text, put in your best proxy for it. So you can clip it, take something out, leave the important bits in there. But let us know if I'm not quite sure where we're going to stick that limit. You mentioned 150 characters as being too small. I agree. And I actually think that we don't even support that right now. I think we're actually at 80 characters. But whatever the thing is, we will make it longer. And if we didn't get it long enough, let us know. And if someone wants to start chatting in there and saying, I know for a fact I need 322 characters, please add it in there.
Great. All right. I think there were a lot of questions, similar questions that you just answered there. So I'm trying to sift through a lot of them right now. What about foreign languages? Will this work with world languages?
Yeah, so yes, definitely. So alt text is interesting because we anticipate it. So right now we don't localize any content. We've got the app only partially localized into German, Portuguese, Spanish, Hindi. And when I say only partially, I mean mostly just the student experience. Most of the teacher experiences haven't been localized, and then none of the content is. And we haven't really built up a nice section in the store to make it really simple. I've heard requests from folks like, can you make it a little easier for me to find my German or Spanish content? And we've got the filters. We've set up language as native language and instructional language to really help it. So, and hopefully everyone understands that distinction. We did a lot of training for content creators to understand if you're trying to teach French, but your teaching and instructions are in English, well, then you're English language teaching French. Versus if you're a French immersion, well, then you're a French deck, and maybe you're teaching math, or maybe you're teaching French, but you're a French native. Maybe you're not teaching French. You're just a French native language teaching math. So there are ways to find it. The alt text, we haven't put any localization into it yet. Think of that coming maybe next year if that's going to be important to you. I'm going to say that I don't think it is, because I feel like what you really want to do is, here's my Spanish deck. All my labels are in Spanish. All my alt text is in Spanish. And here's my English language one, and all the alt text is in English, and all the labels and images. So so the localization for you guys should really be done at the deck level, not within elements within the card, is my opinion, but I'm subject to be persuaded otherwise.
We're actually over time and we have a lot of unanswered questions. There's a couple things we could do. So we could save all these questions and kind of type up some answers and send them out to all the folks who registered for this webinar. Folks are also asking for kind of like a short video tutorial of how to add accessibility text to your images or sounds. We could also include that in an FAQ or upload it to our YouTube channel, Boom Learning, where we've got a ton of tutorials. So once we get that up and running, we can send that out to you as well. So for now, I want to thank you all for joining. You've got great questions. I'm saving them all, not to worry. Eric, actually, maybe would you be able to demonstrate how to add accessibility text quickly right now?
You know what? Shame on me. It's like, hey guys, come learn about how to do accessibility, and we're going to talk a lot of words, but by God, we refuse to show you anything. And you know, shame on me because Tu did ask if I was going to go into demo mode, and I said, you know, I don't know, maybe we'll see, play it by ear. Well, I guess that's where we're at. So I want to show a couple of things. So I got a background image, and if you remember that example I talked about, you know, with the background image and these interactables. So like this one, the question might be find the mouse or something. But if it's an identification one, then to Rika's point, well, then I maybe shouldn't put very clever alt text because I don't want to say mouse and scissors. I'd want to say like black and shiny thing or little critter with a tail and pointy, you know, ears or something. But so how do you do this? So when I'm looking over here, that's a terrible example. Let's go grab this one. So when I'm looking over here on the selectable items list on the right-hand side, I can see, oh, accessibility's text is missing on this image. When I tap it, it says, here's the picture that I'm supposed to label. And I just want to call this one a penny. So I'm just going to do that. And I'm marking it there. And this one here is, what's that? Oh, that's another penny. I think that's a penny behind a penny because that's what you guys do all the time. But for this one, well, let's actually just, oh no, there's a second penny over here. Okay, so this guy here, I can tell when I select it, he got outlined over there. That's the one that's missing its accessibility text. Anytime I've got an image or a sound selected in the we call this the item toolbar here, and the properties are always the item specific properties. So the general properties are always up here and the item specific ones are at the bottom. And I can see accessibility text. So if I tap it, I can be like, you know what? I don't know what to do. I can't come up with anything good. By God, let's just make that none. And then, so what happens is it says like, there's no accessibility text. It's no longer flagged. And so let's go look at a sound. So here's a sound. I select it. Its accessibility text has been set to none. I can, you know, click on here and say, well, no, I want it to say something. This one's says that it's a dog barking because it's just woof, woof, woof. And, you know, so it's just dog barking. So that's my accessibility text for that guy. And now I'm all ready to go. So let me go ahead and publish this. First I got to unpublish it. Okay. So I'm going to publish it. And, oh, I guess I don't have any mistakes. Wait a minute. I do have a mistake. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm running live code and we've turned off the warning. So at the time that I would have hit publish, it would have scanned, found the first card that was missing. But you can also kind of audit these by, if I look here, there's nothing that's mentioned as missing. In fact, it's just a bunch of blank text. There's not even anything in these texts. If I look here, there's nothing red. If I look over here, oh, look at that. There's something red here. I'm missing some text, some accessibility text for this image. What is this image? Well, it's self-labeled as a card, why ever it's that. So I think that should just say card. Great. Now, maybe it was a playing card, maybe it's the ace of spades. I could have said anything like that. I can be as creative and clever or inventive for drawing. I could have said blue card. Right, that's it. So it's just really simple to do that. Select the item. Anytime you select an item, you can see it selected here. All the item controls are down here. You tap on the accessibility section here. That's a small dog yapping, whatever, and you change it that way. Okay, that concludes that demo. I apologize for running over time, folks. Just out of respect, I think we got to wrap this up. And I'm also sorry we missed apparently a bunch of questions getting answered, but we'll certainly put out a Q&A.
I think we'll definitely circle back to all the questions that we did answer and didn't answer, and we'll write up a summary of answers and send that out to you in a week or so once we've had time to kind of review all of them. Again, thank you for joining us. This was recorded. We will be sending you a link to the recording tomorrow, and we're here to work with you. So you can email us at help@boomlearning.com if you've got any questions about that. We'll be happy to help you. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll be having more webinars. And actually, I think our CEO suggested something great here. Mary suggested we have maybe some workshops where you can bring your boom cards that you're working on and ask us questions on how to best optimize this, or how to use the order, or how do I add accessibility text to my sound? What's the right accessibility text to add in this scenario? So I think we're going to be having more workshops like that. So you can come to us with your boom cards and we'll be happy to help you there. Anyway, thanks again. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye, everybody.